My name is Aurora Sterling, but my friends call me Rory. I stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window in my father's penthouse, looking down at the New York City streets below, feeling like a pawn in a game I was being forced to play. In 1 week, I was scheduled to marry Silas Blackwood, a ruthless billionaire titan of industry, a man as cold and imposing as the skyscrapers that bore his name. My father, Marcus Sterling, had orchestrated the entire affair. He was selling me, his only daughter, to secure a corporate merger he believed would make him a legend. He thought he was closing the deal of his life. He didn't know that I had already made a different deal. He didn't know that the night before, I had a secret meeting with the one person who hated Silas Blackwood more than anyone, his own daughter. My father thought he was delivering a lamb to the slaughter. He had no idea that the lamb had already formed a pact with the wolf inside the castle walls, and together, we were planning to burn the entire kingdom to the ground. Before I continue my story, I need your help to keep this channel going. Take 1 second and hit the like button and subscribe right now. It's a simple, free gesture for you, but it's incredibly significant for us. It tells YouTube that you value these stories of justice, which helps us reach more people. Now that you've done that, let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I want to see how far our community of survivors reaches. Let's get back to how our father's greed led them straight into our perfectly laid trap. I grew up in the shadow of my father's ambition. Marcus Sterling was the CEO of a mid-tier manufacturing company, a business he had inherited from my grandfather. But mid-tier was never enough for him. He was obsessed with breaking into the upper echelon of New York's corporate world. He wanted his name mentioned in the same breath as the titans of Wall Street. Our luxurious penthouse apartment, the expensive cars, the charity galas, it was all a carefully curated image, funded by risky loans and the slow bleeding of his company's resources. He was playing a game he couldn't afford, and he was losing. My own ambitions were a source of constant disappointment to him. I was a data analyst. I found beauty and truth in numbers, in finding patterns hidden within complex data sets. To my father, my job was little more than glorified clerical work. He couldn't boast about a data analyst at his country club. He wanted a daughter who was a lawyer or an investment banker, someone whose career could be a status symbol. He dismissed my passion as a boring dead-end job for someone without real drive.
The pressure to marry well began when I was in college. My father saw marriage not as a partnership of love, but as the ultimate corporate merger. He introduced me to a string of suitable young men from powerful families, but none were powerful enough for his grand ambitions. Then, he set his sights on the ultimate prize, Silas Blackwood. Silas was a corporate raider, a man in his 60s known for hostile takeovers and a complete lack of sentiment. He was unimaginably wealthy and utterly ruthless. The fact that he was a widower with a daughter my age only made the arrangement more transactional in my father's eyes. My father saw a merger with Blackwood Industries as his ticket to the big leagues. For months, he maneuvered, called in favors, and leveraged every connection he had to put me in Silas's path. When Silas finally expressed interest in a strategic alliance between our two companies, sealed by a marriage to me, my father was triumphant. He told me it was my duty, my one great purpose, to save the Sterling family name and secure our legacy. My own feelings were irrelevant. I was simply the most valuable asset he had left to trade.
The engagement was announced in the Wall Street Journal. I felt a cold, creeping dread. I was being sold, and my own father was the auctioneer. I spent my nights poring over data, not for work, but for a way out, finding nothing. I felt completely and utterly trapped. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received an anonymous, encrypted email. It simply said, "Your father is not the only one being played. If you want the truth, meet me, alone." The message included the address of a discreet coffee shop in a neighborhood I rarely frequented. My journalistic instincts, the ones my father had tried to suppress, took over. I went. Waiting for me in a corner booth was a woman with piercing, intelligent eyes and an aura of coiled tension. It was Sloane Blackwood, the billionaire's daughter. I had only seen her in photos, always looking poised and perfect by her father's side. In person, I saw the fire and resentment behind the facade. She got straight to the point. She informed me that her father had no intention of merging with my father's company as an equal partner. The deal was a lie. Silas's plan was to use the merger to gain access to my father's infrastructure and client list, then gut the company, absorb the valuable assets, and saddle the remaining shell with so much debt that it would collapse within a year. My father, Marcus, would be left with nothing but public humiliation and personal bankruptcy. Sloane then told me her own story. She had spent her life as a prisoner of her father's ambition, forced into a corporate role she despised. She hated him for his cruelty, for the way he treated people as disposable assets, and for the countless lives he had ruined in his rise to power. For years, she had been quietly gathering evidence of his crimes: insider trading, shell corporations, money laundering. She had the ammunition to destroy him, but she needed a trigger, a way to expose him without being destroyed herself. That's when she proposed an alliance. She told me she had seen my work, my analytical skills. She said, "Your father underestimates you. So does mine. Let's use that to our advantage." Her plan was audacious. I would go through with the wedding. This would give us both access and time. During the post-merger transition period, we would combine our skills. She, the insider with access to the highest levels of Blackwood Industries, would provide the raw data. I, the data analyst, would use my expertise to find the undeniable proof, the smoking gun that connected both our father's criminal activities. We would not just stop the deal, we would take everything. In that small coffee shop, a pact was forged. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the docile, obedient fiancé, attending dress fittings and tasting cakes, playing my part perfectly. By night, Sloane and I worked in secret, communicating through encrypted channels. She would send me fragments of data, ledgers, offshore account numbers, transaction logs. I would stay up all night, analyzing, cross-referencing, building a timeline. We discovered that our fathers weren't just about to become business partners. They had been secret co-conspirators for years in a series of illegal market manipulation schemes. The merger was simply the final act of their criminal enterprise. The evidence was damning, and it was beautiful. The wedding was a cold, magnificent affair, a gathering of sharks dressed in couture. I walked down the aisle, my heart steady, no longer a victim, but a soldier on the eve of battle. I said "I do," knowing that the word was not a promise of love, but the trigger for our revolution. The climax of our plan was not the wedding, but the first official board meeting of the newly formed Sterling Blackwood conglomerate, held 1 week later. The boardroom was a shrine to corporate power, a long mahogany table surrounded by the most influential figures in the industry. My father and Silas Blackwood sat at the head of the table, triumphant, two kings celebrating their conquest. They were presenting their grand vision for the future, a presentation filled with buzzwords about synergy and growth. They were just getting to the Q&A section when the boardroom doors opened. Sloane and I walked in. The room fell silent. My father's smile faltered, his expression turning to confusion and then anger. Silas stared at his daughter, his eyes narrowing with cold fury. A board member asked what the meaning of this interruption was.
I didn't answer him. I looked directly at my father and his new partner.
I informed the board that we were there to present an alternative vision for the company's future, one based on transparency and legality. Then, on the massive screens behind the conference table, I projected the first piece of our evidence, a detailed flowchart mapping the web of offshore shell corporations linking my father's company directly to Silas's illegal trading activities. For the next 15 minutes, Sloan and I took turns. She provided the context, the insider knowledge of meetings and secret deals. I provided the proof, the data, the spreadsheets, the timelines, the irrefutable digital trail that my father and Silas thought they had hidden. We detailed every crime, from the initial seed of their conspiracy to the final, arrogant plan to gut my father's company. The faces of the board members went from annoyance to shock to horror. My father was sputtering, calling it lies, a fantasy concocted by a bitter daughter. Silas was silent, his face a mask of stone, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He knew the data was real. The final slide of our presentation was a single document, a copy of our entire dossier, which we had already sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission and the FBI an hour before the meeting began. As if on cue, the boardroom doors opened again. This time, it wasn't us. It was two federal agents who walked directly to the head of the table and informed Silas Blackwood and Marcus Sterling that they were under arrest for financial crimes. The trap had been sprung. The kings had been dethroned. The arrests became the biggest financial news story of the decade. The Sterling Blackwood conglomerate was on the verge of collapse. The board was in chaos, their reputations at stake. In an emergency session, their lawyers determined that the company bylaws contained a succession clause. In the event of criminal malfeasance by the primary officers, controlling interest would pass to the next of kin not implicated in the crimes. There were only two such people, Sloan and me. We didn't just inherit a company, we inherited an empire. Our first act as the new heads of the board was to announce a complete overhaul. We initiated a full internal audit, cooperated completely with federal investigators, and liquidated every toxic and illegally obtained asset. We used the funds to pay back the investors our fathers had cheated and to create a restitution fund for the smaller companies they had destroyed. We rebuilt the company from the ground up, this time on a foundation of ethics and transparency. My father sold me to gain a seat at the table of power, believing I was his weakest asset. Instead, he delivered me directly to the one person who could help me take the entire table. Our revenge was not just about taking their money and their freedom, it was about destroying their corrupt legacy and building something better in its place. We proved that true power isn't found in boardrooms through deceit and intimidation, but through unlikely alliances, shared conviction, and the quiet, undeniable power of the truth. If this story of justice and revolution resonated with you, then do your part to support our channel. Smash that like button. It tells YouTube you want more stories where the powerful are held accountable. And if you want to be part of our community, subscribe and turn on all notifications. It costs you nothing, and it ensures you never miss a moment of satisfying revenge. Now, I want to hear from you. If you had the evidence to take down a corrupt empire, what would be your first move? Let me know your master plan in the comments below. Thank you for watching.